So I kind of want to switch gears a little bit. I know you also talk a lot about fertility, and it's a topic we haven't talked about on the show before. So I was so interested when I saw you discuss it. So fertility after 35. So what advice or tips do you have for women that are, reaching that age or thinking about having kids later on in life?
The struggle is real. That is what I will say about that. If you follow me on Rue The Boob Boss, you'll kind of follow my journey. And I have two boys. I have a 7-year-old, almost 8, and one who's going to be 4 next month.
Oh.
And yeah, I know, time flies. And I'm 37 now. And I always knew it was funny. I had my first son, and I was like, I'm never doing this again. And then it took me 3, almost 4 years to be like, okay, maybe we should do it. And then as soon as I gave birth to my second son, literally as soon as he came out, I was like, I cannot wait to do this again.
Oh.
And it was insane. And my husband's eyes are literally like popping out in his head. He's like, what have we done? Like, this is a lot. And the one thing that I will say is a lot of times, especially with parenting, when you've got two like really hands-on, really involved parents, you can try and out-parent each other. And you can, as a couple, can get lost in this whole parenting journey. So I'm always talking about how do you baby proof your marriage. So, fast forward about 3, 4 years, it took about that long for me to convince my husband that we need to have another baby. Because he was like, yeah, no, we're not doing this again. We barely made it through after baby number 2. So why would we have another one? And so we finally got to the place where we're like, we're in this great place. And he's like, okay, fine. So literally I wore my husband down. And then I was like, yeah, first baby, it was one of those, oh, what, we're pregnant. And then second baby, I took my IUD out and never got my cycle. The next month I was pregnant. So third baby, right? I was like, yeah, we're just gonna get pregnant. And at 37, month 1, then month 2, then 3, 4, 5. I'm like, wait, hold on. This is not what happens to me. Like, I just get pregnant, right? This is not a problem. And then I started having to really pay attention to like, what does my cycle look like? And is everything normal? And went in for a fertility screen. And only to find out that, my age is super low. And I'm like, I have fertility problems. And it was such a rude awakening. And it's not that I didn't know how your fertility starts to decline from the time you're in your 30s. Your fertility really starts to decline. And there's so many women out there. I've been busy with raising the boys, running a business, just, being a boss babe, doing what I do. And you always take it for granted, especially if you've had babies, that when I'm ready to have another one, it's just going to happen. And the first thing that I would any women, especially if you're in your 30s or getting closer to 35, is you don't have as much time as you think you do. One of the first things that you want to do is just check on your baseline fertility. So if you're 35 for sure and you're like, okay, I'm going to start having a baby, we normally say to you, try for 6 months. And then after 6 months, if nothing's happening, come on in and we'll run some labs. No, don't try for 6 months. Just go on in when you decide you want to have a baby, talk to your OB and say, can you tell me where I stand? So that you're not trying for 6 months in vain. Because if I had just gone in and got my labs checked, I would have known that I wasn't going to be able to get pregnant without a little bit of help. Like, it was never going to be able to happen for me just because of how everything was following. Second thing I would say is know your cycle. And I think a lot of women, especially if you've been on birth control, you've had an IUD, you kind of gets lost. Like, who tracks their cycle anymore? Like, right? And there's so many apps that can help you do this, but this is something that's really going to help you figure out, like, when are you ovulating? Because you only have about 12 to 24 hours that egg, when you ovulate, is when that egg is released, and it only lives in your body for about 12 to 24 hours. So you have such a narrow window for you to get pregnant. So knowing when that happens every single month is going to increase your chances, so that you guys know when you're supposed to be doing the baby dance. So when I started tracking my cycle, I found out it was only 24 days, which really wasn't giving me enough time for me to even get pregnant and stay pregnant, which was the big issue. So fortunately for me, I have started working with fertility, and it's been mind-blowing. Wasted about 5 months before I actually figured out what was going on, because I was like, oh no, it's going to be fine. And I think in your 30s, especially late 30s, you don't have the luxury of doing that, because every single year that passes, your chances of getting pregnant without any help continue to decrease.
Wow. Yeah, that's such a good point about really knowing your body and knowing what's normal for you and getting the fertility check too. Because I think you're right. A lot of times people are like, oh, I got plenty of time. So when someone does get pregnant, 35 plus, how does that pregnancy kind of differ?
You know, there's the term that we also love, geriatric pregnancy, right? And after 35, you're considered advanced maternal age and high risk.
Mm-hmm.
So we do know, when you're born as a woman, you're born with all the eggs that you're ever going to
Mm-hmm.
have. And so with time, all they're doing is aging. And
Mm-hmm.
that's part of the issue that we have. And so I always like to say, you know, I've got like scrambled eggs, right? Because it's just 37 years later, my eggs are like tired. And there are going to be a lot of genetic changes that potentially can happen. So women in their late 30s are more at risk of having genetic disorders, and which is why they do a ton more testing. You're also at high risk of, you know, diabetes, gestational diabetes, hypertension, especially women of color, developing preeclampsia. So, needless to say, they're going to handle you, excuse the pun, like an egg. And everybody is just going to want to keep, you know, hawk eyes on you, and definitely make sure that the pregnancy is progressing that normally. It's not only harder to get pregnant at older, it's also harder to stay pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like this double whammy. So everybody is definitely, you know, keeping an eye on you a little closer. You're going to be seeing your obstetrician or your midwife a little bit more often. Um, and there's been a lot of talk I'm hearing now, especially once you're in your late 30s, getting into 40s, and you're pregnant, about not letting moms get, you know, definitely they're not going to let you go over 40 weeks. We know your placenta is going to age,
Mm-hmm.
and they've had better outcomes when they start um, inducing moms, which I'm not a big fan of, but at like 39 weeks, trying to get moms to deliver at about 39 weeks, as opposed to letting them go all the way through to 40, 41 weeks. So again, those are all the things that, you know, start getting pulled off the table. So in your late 30s, your medical care is going to be just more medical.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Very interesting. Yeah, it's definitely good to just, I think, yeah, be aware of it. I know our audience is kind of all over it with age range and where they are at in their fertility journey.